All right, so we're gonna get
Gotta have the
started.
second part on it, especially if you like it.
Yeah, and so Fuzzy, thank you for taking the time again. I wanted to take this to pick your brain. I know you're a veteran within this family of blockchains, and you've been there since BitShares, the very beginning. So just wanted to take this time to at least start off asking some questions, open it up to the audience for any questions that they may have. And so initially, I know within the Ethereum community and some of the other people within the broader blockchain community, one of the things that I wanted to ask you, because I've seen some innovative ideas that you've had around decentralization. So one of the fears on EOS is the potential for collusion or for centralization of BPs because there's 21. What are your thoughts on that, and how can we increase that over time?
Number one, and it's not a popular one, is the idea that we have term limits on block producers.
Okay.
And that would be, the reason for that is, I think, pretty obvious when you look at our own political system.
Right.
Especially when you look at the ones who've been around and can't leave office. And kind of have been there forever and, get tenure in some way, shape, or form and don't leave. Even if somebody, if people love you, there generally is a time and a place for you to move on. And if you create value as a block producer, there's no reason to believe that block producers who create lots of value wouldn't be able to find work in other places.
Yeah, consulting. They could help, the new up-and-comers come in and...
Yeah, or even being block producers on other test chains, right? Like, that would be one. And I think that that's an important thing to bring up, and I don't think it's very much. I would like it discussed more because, let's face it, guys, these are problems that, a lot of these problems are still the same problems. We just have a few different tools, right? You can still learn a lot from how we've done things with some of these. Now the question, of course, when it goes a little bit deeper into that. So there's a little bit more you can go. I don't know how far you want me to go into it, but I would say that personally, that would be one of the main things that that wouldn't really have a consequence on the network in terms of harming anybody. If there was we know that equipment has a life cycle. We know that it's a general, technological equipment. It generally has a certain life cycle. So I don't think that would be a problem. I think that's a good one. Voting decay, I'm not a big fan of. I think that just that makes it so I'm more likely to create a bot for you to vote every day using your own keys, on my platform, or centralized exchanges, get a benefit on that. I'm trying to think of a couple other things that would help without going too deep into it. The other one would be DAX as VPs.
That's the one that I found very interesting.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little on that?
You would like me to go into that a little bit?
Please.
Of course. When you look at as a block producer, what is the block producer doing? They're producing blocks. They're getting paid in the network for securing the transactions in the network, or the operations in the network, as we like to say these days, since not all operations have to be a transaction, right? There can be other things on the chain. So my thoughts on it are, what if block producer that's making $2 million a year or something to that effect is its own DAG? Well, there are a couple problems that solves. One, right now we see with block producers, a lot of people are saying they're not very transparent, right? You don't really know a whole lot that's going on with them. Number two is that there's that concern that there's a small group of whales who are allowing everybody, who are voting in their buddies. And that's the only metric that matters, right? And to a degree that could be true, and the community would not really know all the details because it's still so young. But one of the things that we could do, since we don't have a whole lot of these tools, what if the block producers had their own DAC? And it could be like a social network of sorts, like a forum, like we started with BitShares, and what EOS and pretty much every crypto cryptocurrency ends up happening, right? You can have your own essentially decentralized forum where you log everything that you're doing, you reward people within the DAC, you create your own value proposition, and then if your DAC is extremely valuable on the network or on coin market cap, has extremely high market cap because it's brought so much value, it's pretty hard for people to argue that metric if you're not voted in as a block producer with your DAC, right? Because if you look at everybody and you say, hey, I have not been receiving $2 million of EOS every year, and look what we've done with this DAC, well, then the likelihood is that people like me are going to see that and say, well, if they're not voted in, I'm going to just buy into their DAC. And it's just going to help keep them sovereign and allow them to continue going as a self-sustaining ecosystem. However, if it becomes so obvious that all the whales are like, why wouldn't we subsidize them? Why wouldn't we give the 2 million EOS every year? Then it becomes a different situation, doesn't it? It becomes a whole different situation. If I'm looking at your DAC producer and I'm saying, wow, they have never been funded all this stuff and they're worth this much. Imagine if I buy their token right now and I go around telling everybody to vote for them so they can get subsidized by the EOS mainnet. Well, now what happens? If you guys get a bunch of funding and you've already built a bunch of value without a whole lot of funding, well, that's a pretty good play for me, right? And it's also a pretty good opportunity for me to buy tokens in your DAC and then go out and create a committee that starts running around and advocating for you to get voted in, because that's good for my money too, right? So I think that this social dynamic that can be created between having DACs that are decentralized block producers, essentially, or block producers that are decentralized DACs that are self-sustaining, transparent, right? And not only that, self-governing. You add that into the entire equation, and then even add, if I'm not positive, this is like the cherry on the top that I'm hoping for, and I'm pretty sure we can potentially do from talking to some people. But if that cherry on the top is that now your DAC can also have 21 block producers individually within there, now you have 21 block producers on EOS mainnet. And if each of those are DACs with their own 21 block producers, 21 times 21 is what, 442 nodes. So if you could have 442 nodes on the network, that's approximately 100 times the decentralization of Bitcoin, right? With its four mining pools that are basically controlling, right? I'll shut up though, because I will continue and I'll answer every question before you ask. So I'm trying to be very careful on that front.
So following up on that, anyone else on the topic of decentralization? I want to open this up as we go along, because the next I'm going to move on to user adoption. Anyone? Good. Okay. So as I'm sure many people recently, and we kind of talked about this earlier, I've been watching the Elon Musk interview in all of its interesting glory. But the one piece that I found that was super interesting was when he started to talk about adoption on centralized platforms, and that what it breaks down to at its root cause is limbic resonance. And I thought that was a very interesting terminology in that outside of what we think of as our thinking mind, there are primal drives that are, that are being met by these platforms. So on that topic, is there anything that you see that seems to be the main thing? It's betting, it's things like Lolly, it's dating apps and things that are meeting these primal drives that we've had for hundreds of thousands of years. Anything that you see to drive user adoption outside of limbic resonance?
Outside of that, I would say, here's what I'll say, is that there are whole industries that are directed toward this one goal, right? And I would love to say that we respond on a more enlightened level, but it seems that in general, humanity does tend to be like our shock and awe, right? I have a joke in our hangouts that I always say that the things that we do use technology for are sex and war. Those are the two first things that generally technology, right? If we and sadly, I mean that's about as primal as it gets, right? Those are really two very powerful things that stem from the same place in humanity, and I don't think we can get rid of it. The one thing I do think, though, is that we're in this weird place where we've had all these brilliant psychologists, psychiatrists, gamification experts, behavioral economists, who are all sitting there and they're trying to solve problems in their hobby time that would help humanity. And they're working for people who don't really have the intent on that in their daytime hours. And I'm not saying that that's the entire case, but I'm saying in terms of Facebook and these examples that you're talking about, which are, let's face it, the lion's share of these institutions are not doing this stuff with necessarily our best interests at heart. And what I do think that we will do is I think what we are doing, and this is actually one of the things that excites me most as a gamification person, is we're opening up the ability for people to start gamifying anything they want. If they think that they can gamify it and they can get people addicted to enjoying, I see my son running around in a Minecraft game, playing with people, and he's learning because that's also something that's very primal, right? That we want to be together, we want to connect with others. So even through this video game, he's learning things, he's building 20th Century Fox, I don't know why, but he's doing all these different things, but he's also connecting, right? And when he's connecting, he's finding out all these different things about himself. He's learning about himself, but what he's also learning is he's learning from other people. He's learning from the incentive structures they've built, that they've utilized for their own reasons, right? So I think I guess to boil it down, I don't think we're ever going to get away from it, but what we're moving into is a more responsible era of using that superpower that we have. It comes from that knowledge, right? I think that's where we're going. And I think that that's one of the most exciting things to me about cryptocurrency, right? Because just a reflection of that would be Bitcoin. Like I was talking to you earlier, right? Bitcoin, it does solve something that's pretty primal. We want to have resources. We are afraid, so we want to have resources that we hoard, that we know we'll always have them, so we can live forever or whatever we think, right? It's these primal things that we think. And what did Satoshi Nakamoto do? He said, wait a second, I understand that this is the truth. This is a psychological thing that is deeply rooted into people. Also need to leverage that to get a specific demographic on board for a specific technology that has a specific use case. And because he knew all those things, he designed something using the same thing that Facebook uses, but he did something completely philosophically different, right? Something mind-blowing, staggeringly different, paradigm changing, right? He used the same kind of gamification and addictive techniques that like the block having and all these things, every block you mine, right? He knew all this and he designed it for a specific use case. So what I think you're going to see, and this is kind of where I get excited about EOS, I'm the founder of something called Beyond Bitcoin. A lot of people don't know, but that's where we started this shit. And I always talked about we need to go beyond Bitcoin with this technology. And Ethereum, people would message me about, people wanted me, Adam V wanted me to go to Let's Talk Bitcoin. And others wanted me to go to different places, but I found myself saying, how can I do that if we really can't go beyond Bitcoin? Right? So the reason I bring this up is that EOS, and what I keep telling everybody is EOS brought us, and delegated proof of stake brought us to this point. Now we can go beyond Bitcoin. We can have different use cases that are exciting to different demographics. Some might be exciting to a person who is always wanting to be afraid. But there again, there are also people who like scary movies because they like to be afraid. So it must be valuable to somebody, right? But this is the kind of thing that I think we're getting to, is custom tailored use cases that drive adoption, right? That's a long answer.
No, great one. And I think you're leading into the next place I was going to, which is side chains, and I know that you're an advisor on a couple different EOS side chains, such as Warbly, right? So that's one.
What are those Warbly? Yes.
I'm sorry.
One of them is Warbly, yes.
And that one's specifically tailored to financial services, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So
yes,
yeah.
that is their goal, right? And you come from that yourself to a large degree.
Right.
Okay, so I'm sure you can understand that they're. Oh,
do you hear that background music, or that noise, or is that just us locally?
Mm-hmm.
Can we turn off the radio? There we go. Thank you.
As long as it was heavy death metal.
Yeah, right.
It was a U.S. Army commercial.
Yes, yeah, and so that's one in terms of, if you look at the financial industry, rehypothecation and record keeping of ownership, and I know Caitlin Long has talked about this ad nauseum, and one of the things that has really driven her into blockchain technology is the integrity of what that technology can bring to the financial industry as a whole. So I mean, tell us a little bit about that experience on Warbly and where you see it going and how it's going to factor into when we get to inter-blockchain communication and circling back to adoption. So just
sure.
thoughts.
What I will say is this: whenever you started out with Bitcoin in the very early days, okay, it started out. It was about probably 1 to 2 years before altcoins started really coming onto the scene. I might be incorrect on that because it's been a while. But at some point in time, it wasn't too long, 1 or 2 years in, you would start seeing a bunch of different chains popping up, different chains. You'd have, they were trying new economic things at first, or changing something little like Litecoin did, like the block times and having Litecoin was actually pretty interesting because it changed the algorithm to something other than SHA-256, right? To script. And that was the first change, right? That was so innovative. Oh my God, everybody freaks out. It's like, this is Litecoin. We are Litecoin. 60-second blocks. We've got script, and instead of having to have an ASIC, you have to have GPU cards, and if you're a gamer, it's perfect, right? And you had this. I don't want to call it a fracturing, because it seems like a fracturing, but really what it was the growing of another community from a root community, another branch, so to speak, on the tree, right? Which could gather more sunlight for us. Okay, so you had this other branch that came on the tree, and then you have a bunch of other branches come on the tree. But the problem with these branches were that they weren't really growing a lot of leaves to pick up the sunlight, right? And why was that? That was because of a couple of problems. One, none of them really scaled, and two, they were so hard to use. Like, if I said, am I going to get my mom to send me a long hash? No. I'm never going to get her to do it. I guarantee you, I would never get her to do it. As much as I would love to, I would never get her to do it. But now we are in a different paradigm, right? Now we have a blockchain that can go beyond Bitcoin. You can customize the EOS IO code base to do whatever you want with it, right? And if you share drop on the EOS community, you're probably going to get them to notice you. You're probably going to get your coin trading against EOS, which is very similar to what happened with Bitcoin, right? Everybody wants to have their coin on an exchange trading against Bitcoin. Just that very thing in and of itself is, wow, amazing, right? They pay lots of money for that, right? And here's the thing, though. these coins can scale, they can provide value propositions, they can offer value propositions that actually require, that are so valuable that they can charge for the services. So they can make income too, right? Now, if you look at that branch that grew off EOS and goes, it's going to look at something like Warbly. It's going to have a few more leads on it, isn't it? It's going to catch a little bit more sunlight. And what happens to that sunlight is it supports the Warbly chain, right? The Warbly branch. But it also gets funneled to the main branch in various ways throughout the process of that life, the tree's life cycle, right? So I look at these as kind of in that way. If you look at them as funnels, branches, you can call it, if you want to go from the marketing angle, call it a funnel, right? I'm sure that sex chain will get a certain demographic that CPA chain won't, let's face it, guys, like there's different demographics. And I know that I choose the funniest one, the crazy one first, the most radical one to talk about in public. But that's where we're going, right? There's going to be, for every different value proposition, you're going to have things like, kind of like with Ethereum. You guys remember when with Ethereum, you had crypto kitties? The problem with crypto kitties?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and what did I say to people? I said it was the worst possible demographic they could have heard. If it was a stupid logistics chain, it wouldn't have been a problem because nobody cares about logistics. No matter, even though it's extremely important, from a PR perspective, the crypto kitties was worse, right? And the reason I bring that up is simply because these use cases are going to cover a spectrum. And Warbly, I believe, covers a very important part of that spectrum. And it's going to have specific needs that community needs. And I'm sure that there are needs that you can define from that EOS cannot meet right now. And I would say that Warbly is in one of those places where they are trying to they have ideas, okay, and they've got a really good team on things. But they're also trying to get community together to try to work on a specialized chain for this type of use case because, let's face it, it is going to have its own unique requirements that EOS might not be able to offer, right? Feel free.
And let me just follow up. So you think this, in terms of the blockchain ecosystem, this would supplant something like Polychain or Polymath, right? Because it's
Say that again?
Polymath is a security token. So this is something, again, without having full knowledge of Warbly and what it's going to be customized to, in terms of that security token, tokenizing all financial assets. That would just sit on Warbly, correct? So it would supplant Polymath.
I would supplant's a hard word because here's the thing. If they succeed, yes, right? But that's also the thing that's kind of interesting about where we are. Because we are largely walking through a cave in the dark with a candle, right? And it's really important. One of the really important jobs for somebody who's entering the cave system is that one guy who goes through and plots it all out. That's a pretty important job, right? It's a very valuable thing. So that's essentially what chains like Warbly are trying to do. They're saying, hey guys, there's a huge network of caves. There's probably shit tons of diamonds down there. Not that I don't want to get into the diamond frog, but anyway, there's a bunch of gold down there. We just need to map out the caves and find it. And if I'm to say, hey, silly, you want to go down there? We only have room for one person to go down. We don't want 7 people going down there to go, no, that's not what we want, right? We want to support these people creating the entire cartography landscape of that cave system. So that's where we largely are right now. And everybody in proof of work will never say that, especially the Ethereum people. They will say we've been there, done that. But I mean, when we look at CryptoKitties, I don't know how I can do anything but disagree, like logically. So I think we're still at that point all these chains that could exist, as long as they're showing that they're doing things, they're building value. I think that's the main thing, right? Everything else, you got to be careful, obviously, but this is a free market. So you're going to see people who come out and say, oh, I'm creating Barbly. And Barbly is, better distributed Warbly. And it probably is not going to be. And it probably will be, run by people who have ill intent. However, it might not be. You might find somebody, it's going to be very hard you're going to have to do your own research. But the good chains, the ones that are trying to bring real value, man, especially if they're share dropping on us, I think we should love it. I think we should be promoting it. I think we should be telling them, heck yeah, when you trade your token against EOS, right? Let's get all these tokens trading against EOS. I don't know if you guys noticed, but the last time I checked on CoinMarketCap, one of the biggest determinants of whether it's a good market for altcoins or not is if Bitcoin is dominant or not. Is it an important measurement that we never really talk about? What about if someday we have the EOS dominance or the BitShares dominance index, or right? That might, if you have that, that's really where the best for the money is, right? Especially coming into the network effect point that you brought up earlier.
Yeah, I've got a question. You had mentioned CryptoKitties, and you mentioned like branches coming out and no leaves going on them. And it seems to me that most of us who are in crypto, in some shape or form, are very about the market driving things. And it seems to me that demand is the best determiner of market. So it seems like CryptoKitties was possibly the best thing to ever happen to Ethereum, right? Because people realized firsthand that when Vitalik is saying, yeah, we're 2 years away from being able to handle anything worth a shit, that this articulated that really well and got people actually really believing in. But it seems to me that when we focus on like who's going to invest in these things, really the thing to be focusing on is who's going to be using these things. And no matter how cool we think something is, oftentimes the best technology is not the winner. It's where the demand catches on. And and so it seems like to say that like CryptoKitties was a really bad thing, when that was maybe the most popular app since ICOs to come along to Ethereum, is like kind of the wrong way to look at it. It's like we're looking at things from this investment side. Yes, this is a great way to let funds flow to you to make it so you can develop your system and your blockchain and everything. But we really have to focus on the demand side. Who's using it and how fast can we get them using the services that are out
there? Well, what was CryptoKitties, right? It was, to use your example, or my example that to use that. It's funny because the irony of the entire CryptoKitties situation was it was going to go viral and the chain couldn't support it going viral, right? So it's one of those things where it's like, if you don't focus on adoption, like you said, like if you don't have something that's scalable for those people who you're trying to bring on, that's the biggest concern that you should have, right? After getting them on board, of course. Because let's face it, there's nothing worse than never getting them on board than getting them to want to come on board and then saying, never again. You know what I mean?
That's the problem that any successful tech company has always, that's like the first hurdle. It's like, okay, we got the customers, how do we keep the customers? Otherwise, the next day they're off to something else, and you've talked to Facebook, they dealt with it. You talk, all these other ones. Well, now there's a way that you don't have to have Facebook revenue to be able to handle that kind of load with a blockchain, but we still have to bring them on and iterate through this and improve.
Are you talking about bringing Facebook on and iterating through it?
Oh, no, I'm saying what they did is they got over the hump, right? They got the people, and then they scrambled and did whatever magic shit they had to do, right, to be able to handle it. And Twitter had the famous fail whale. I mean, the fail whale's up again, but there's a certain point when like the fail whale ceases to be quaint and is something that you're no longer willing to tolerate, right? So that's what I'm talking about is helping to get people to where their chains, their applications, everything that's going is in a position where not only can they grab demand, but they can also serve the demand.
Yeah. If you don't mind, before you get started, I would just like to say one thing regarding that. My take on it has been, and I'm biased, okay, but I think I'm fairly biased, and I think I'm fairly biased because I think that what the saddest thing about Ethereum was for me was watching all these brilliant ideas trying to be born on something I don't know if it can be born on. It might be. You might be totally right. They might have something. But here's what concerns me. If I go out telling people this is the best thing since sliced bread, right? And then it CryptoKitties me. Well, it hurts my trust in the industry, right? If that's the best that our industry has, it hurts trust. And if I'm sitting there as a user who's a newbie, who's gone through all of this training to figure out just how to get a wallet and how to get all the stuff, and I've put money into BTC, I've moved it over to Ethereum, just to put money into a white paper that will never be able to exist, or that up to this point, after a long period of time, about 5 years, has not yet existed. I have to ask myself if we're being a little bit irresponsible. And I'm not trying to say that from a mean place. I really am not. I'm coming from a place where I've sat here and I've done this for so long because I'm passionate about it, because I believe it's going to really help. But I think the best way to get funding after seeing this stuff right now, I would say, is to consider having your own DApp or DAC and share, and having those tokens, having some tokens set aside for a dev team, and then approaching Block 1 and asking them to invest in it. Because that would enable them to, do something that helps themselves as well. And then I would even go so far as to say, if you invest a certain amount, and you buy up a certain amount of the tokens, we will share drop a bonus amount on all EOS. These are the types of things that I would be looking at doing. These are the type of things I would be saying to them if I wanted them to support something I was doing, right? And the reason being because if you can give those kind of little incentives, they have more of a reason to give some funding. Now, I don't know if that's going to be I don't know all the legal details behind what's going on. So, my gosh, I might be completely wrong, and maybe they have a viable legal reason why they're not doing it, or any number of things, or might not be. But the wonderful thing is, even with this, is we assume that you don't have funding from Block 1. If we assume that, what's the options, right? The share drop, and if you don't get a whole lot of support, and you feel like or you feel like you can't operate on the mainnet, you can go with your own sovereign chain, right? And you can bring value to EOS, prove people the value. You don't have to cut them off and attack them, join up and post weird videos to their hangouts, right? we can synergize with them, and we can show them. And after a while of building value, if Block 1 doesn't start buying tokens into people's projects who are creating value, it's the dumbest thing they could possibly do, right? Because what are they're doing? They're incentivizing you to just run away and compete directly and never help. And I don't think that's, from hearing what they've said, I don't think that's the route they're going to take. I think it will be possible. I just think that, when you got a bunch of money, you got to learn you got to be very careful how you spend it, right? In the early stages when so much chaos and you're not sure on everything. Go ahead.
And I would just comment in terms of, it seems like they're being very deliberate in that, they have, 10 years of their tokens vest within the smart contract, of a 10-year vest schedule for Block 1's tokens. So, they have 4 billion that could be multiplied many multiples beyond what the $4 billion that they raised. Their tokens could be worth far more than 4.4 or whatever the number is. So it seems like they're drawing up a strategic plan. And in terms of hiring, you've seen some massive names from traditional institutions that are migrating within, into the EOS Block One umbrella, including, what is it, the commissioner of the SEC, who co-hosts a podcast with.
Yeah.
Oh no, the person that created the legal framework for the institutional custody solution for Coinbase, that co-hosts a podcast with
him.
Yes. So it seems like they're attracting talent, and I'm sure devising a long-term strategic plan for the next decade. It has not been unfurled yet. So
Yes.
go ahead.
That's kind of my question, and I'm glad that you're bringing that up, because this is something from the traditional landscape that I'm not aware as aware of, right? But it seems to you from the outside perspective that they have a long-term plan here, right?
Well, and just again, a comment working for a very large private company, they don't work planning quarter to quarter for stock price. They look 10, 20 years out. What are the macro trends that are going to drive their business, and then plan for that. So when you have a platform where they have far more than they could need in the short term to be able to support the platform itself, then their attention turns to how do we drive maximum value for our 100 million tokens.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that the one of the big ones is going to be getting share drops. I think share drops is going to be a huge one. You bring up something that makes me wonder. Do you ever wonder if that's why they call themselves Block One? Like, do you think that maybe we're just going to see a bunch of .1 domains out there someday? A bunch of different dApps, right? Quite an interesting thought. Yeah, anyway, you seem like you've discussed this before. Well, no, if you're a newbie and you're listening to this, you can't say you haven't heard things from people who haven't been around thinking about it.
Fuzzy, I'd just like to thank you for coming out and for joining us today. And
Of course.
You pointed to one thing in your podcast recently, and it was a tweet from, speaking of Block One, it was a tweet from Brendan Bloomer. And I'll just read it because I thought it was something that could resonate here. It says, he tweeted, I think this was on September 8th, or maybe earlier, competing blockchains will soon collaborate through side chains. Religious walls will fall, communities will merge, innovation will compound. And then he puts hashtag BTC EOS ETH. And from my perspective, especially in the Denver community, tribalism is really strong. Developers are pretty loyal. And I just would like to get your perspective on that tweet and ask you, what do you think is needed for religious dogma to be cooled? How can we work together?
That's an interesting question, because I'm going to give you an example of something called the Smoke Network, right? And the Smoke Network, I always joked with people, hey, this is the one cryptocurrency that I can go anywhere. To any cryptocurrency. I could go to Bitcoin lovers, I could go to Litecoin lovers, I could go to Ethereum lovers, I could go pretty much anywhere and say, hey guys, there is a coin for people, a social network for people who smoke weed and like to take pictures of it. And they will, somebody will probably attack me from that community. But then there will be somebody else from that very same community who will say, wait a second, that guy's part of my tribe. Right? Because the key is we can be part of many tribes. And that's the cool thing. Because now, before we had this technology, what were we bound by? Geographic location, right? I had to be part of a citizen of my local area. And that was the only real citizenry of my country, It was bound by geography. It was very difficult for me to be a citizen of the world. a true citizen of the world, where I can be a citizen of any network I want, and I can omit myself from any network I want. And their laws and their right. Now we're in this place where we can be a citizen of many different tribes. And I would say that I don't think that we're ever going to get away from the tribal nature, but I don't think that we need to. And I think the tribal nature actually has had historically some valuable things for us, right? Like there are reasons why we form into tribes: for efficiency, for safety, for companionship, right? But the key is in remembering, I think, we are also a member of many tribes, automatically by default. We just have to recognize that sometimes and be reminded of it sometimes. And a great way of reminding is share dropping. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think that that's an important one. Now, of course, with share dropping, I think that you don't just give things for free. I think that you make the community work for it to a degree, and then you give them bonuses when you get the things that you wanted from mainnet and stuff like that. But to answer your question, I think we don't get away from the tribalism. We simply incentivize people to realize they're part of many tribes, and that many tribes have various, many tribes are necessary, right?
We have a question from Will.
Yeah, feel free.
Hey Fuzzy, it's Will. What's going on, man? From Props for Crops.
Nice to meet you.
Oh yeah, it's me from Props for Crops. How you doing, man?
It's very good to meet you, man. Okay, so you're aware. Okay, so you're this guy right here. I actually connected with Anxious from the Smoke Network.
Yeah, that's why I'm gonna ask a question now. I was gonna go ahead and let it slide about Nasdaq's, but
Sure, man.
Yeah, good to see you, man. Really nice to see you here in Denver.
Good to see you too, buddy.
I guess I just had a quick technical question, and maybe I can focus on the internet. But while I got you here, I figured I'd ask. You know, we're looking at you know, an interface for props that's based off Steam and API, and it works very similar to Steep Shot at the moment, you know. And essentially, obviously, we've discussed this, but I'm really looking at how is it that we can bring the technical functionality of Nasdaq's to Props for Crops itself, or any other social media site where people might want to have their posts posted multiple times over different social networks.
Yeah, you know, that's a good thing. We'll have to discuss it, because one of the things that I've run into, I have some good devs. I never have enough. And I'm sure you guys know what that's like. But with that said, one of the goals that we've had, and one of the interests that we've had, is in making Nasdaq's something where we can connect up to multiple platforms. Because, and the reason why we made Nasdaq's, just to rewind a little bit, was around the time that Dan was announcing EOS. There had been past issues and disagreements, you know, professional disagreements, that turned into something a little bit, censorship on Steam. Let's face it. And at that time, I was saying, you know, we have two options here. We can attack that, or we can work to find a better way that includes Steam, but also offers people the option to post to multiple places. Because rather than reject Steam as though it has zero value, we can acknowledge that it has value, but that it should compete to reward us. Right? Because if I am the user and I am the locus of value, then it makes perfect sense for all platforms to compete to reward me. So I want to post it. Right? And I believe that Nasdaq's was our expression of that. And that was why I reached out to Dan and I said, don't leave Steam. This is one of the places, this is one of the parts of our journey. Right? Keep it alive, post to it, basically as a defiant way of saying, you can't censor me. And if you do, that's fine, I'm posting elsewhere. And that's why we created it, was so you could post to Medium and all the other Nasdaqs. To add your interface or to add your DAC, would just really require us to find access to the APIs and some other things that I can talk to my devs about. But that, I mean, what we want is to connect up DACs with it. So if there are, like, there's even a part up right below it on the bottom that says if you have a DAC that you'd like to connect, go ahead and fill out this form so we can. Good.
Can you just quickly summarize MASDAQs?
Sure.
For those that aren't aware of it.
I love to summarize quickly. You know that. Yeah, that was funny. Okay, so here, real quick, before I do that, I'm going to go up here. Okay, so I've got a picture that I'm going to share with you guys. Because I told Brandon, I was like, what pictures do I need, man? What picture? I'll show you guys pictures as I answer questions. Okay, do you guys see this? This picture of the bank?
Yes.
Okay, so Dan describes this as muxers from back in the day, M-U-X-E-R-S, muxers. But I call them mutual aid society MASDAQs. And under the traditional model of a local investment or a local bank, right? What does the bank do? This is a very simplified version, obviously, but you put money away, you store it, and then they are supposed to go around and help uplift and view value, inject value into the community through investments and things that will increase the value of their investment and also be able to pay you back and also inject value into the local economy, right? But this has been a very centralized model that's been taken advantage of. So with MASDAQs, all we're doing is we're changing the bank and we're saying, okay, we're going to change it. So instead of having something like that, we have a network where you're putting money into a blockchain instead of the bank, right? You're locking that up, and instead of giving rights to somebody else to invest that, you take a percentage of the rights to give value away and invest it in the rest of the community. And if we put a blockchain in, we basically are essentially doing something very similar to what these banks are doing. But here's the thing. We have cooperatives, right? Communities. If you have a mutual aid society, it generally has a reason to exist, something that it's there for, right? A mutual aid society for people with cancer. A mutual aid society for artists, right? Very similar to things like co-ops, right? So they kind of work together, these ideas, but we've never had a blockchain that we could put in there, aka a decentralized autonomous community or cooperative, however you want to call it, right? We don't have the DAC. We have all these things that are centralized around it, right? You look at it, you have the infrastructure control, the service contract control, which is whatever service. Bitcoin would be sending coins. Governance and change control would be obvious, right? Governing and changing things, rules of the network and all that good stuff, right? You have these three spheres, and what a MAS chain essentially does is it enables us to connect all of those with an autonomous, decentralized intermediary, which is the DAC, right? And what a MASDAQ is precisely that. Steam is based on MASDAQ technology. Whale Shares is created using MASDAQ technology, right? So if that's the case, what a MAS chain is, what a MASDAQ is a mutual aid society that is backed by its own sovereign chain. And it can be backed and powered by a community that is impassioned about that specific thing, that specific goal. In the case of Steam, it's blogging, right? In the case of your project, it might be a dating app, right? It could be all kinds of things, right? You never know when there are cooperatives of people who have certain tastes that they like to get together and do certain. Anyway,
Oh, you almost went down that rabbit hole.
cue the video. I hope that answers your question, man.
Yeah. NASDAQ's website. Can you pull that up?
Oh, of course.
And then with that, once we get that website up, any last questions? We're coming up to the end of the time. Chris?
So while you're pulling that up, I do have a question for you that gets in the tribal side of things. One of the things I'm focused on is trying to bridge the gap between traditional businesses and blockchain adoption. And what comes up a lot is Hyperledger and how a lot of businesses are trying to incorporate tools and productive, just good applications that can utilize Hyperledger. So just want to get your thoughts on Hyperledger, because obviously it's not really decentralized in any way.
My thought on Hyperledger is that I have not enough knowledge about it to really have much to say other than this. I've been looking for a long time for scalable blockchain technology. Since the very, very, very beginning of Bitcoin, I was like, man, this is great. But as soon as I heard Dan arguing with Satoshi, which might be him, I don't know. But he was arguing with Satoshi about the scalability and the issues that Bitcoin had, debating that. And that was around the moment when I was like, man, we need scalable tech, right? And I've been searching for it for a long time. And then once we figured out that this was going to scale, it was really hard for me to look away and look to anything else that did, because I haven't found anything in that entire period of time. So I'm not saying there aren't things that exist, and I'm hearing that from what I'm hearing about from you, Hyperledger really doesn't seem to be decentralized at all. It seems like it's centralizing, which might be an issue if that's indeed the fact. And of course, going back to what Raymond was saying, the best technology doesn't always win, right? So we have to be very careful to, I believe, to educate people about how important it is that we have decentralized stuff. As far as Hyperledger goes, though, I don't know enough of it, but I will say it's concerning that a lot of people are talking about these things if they don't exist and really run anything. And especially if they do exist and run things, but they're not really decentralized in any way. Because at that point, what are we doing? Other than selling a lie to people, right? I wish I could give you more, man, but Hyperledger has not been the focus, I guess, on my career, to be honest with you.
One last question. Anyone? Fuzzy, how's it going?
Well,
Hello. No trolling. So you had that pie chart with all the operations in EOS and Steam, and what BitShares have the lion's share. What is there a chart that breaks down what those operations are, or a site?
no, there isn't that I have seen. However, what I will say is there are some statistics that we've noticed on, like there are things like that on BitShares that will break down. This is how many transactions that were, for instance, creating an asset. Here's how many accounts we've had that, or how many operations we've had that have been trading operations, right? So we do have that to a degree on BitShares. Obviously, we know what Steams are pretty much, because there's only a couple of them, right? Voting is mostly in that and posting. I'm sure there are some details on that, but I can't get too deep into Steam, though I do know a lot about that there are things like that for BitShares. I suspect there's a good bit of them for Steam now too. EOS is still very young, so I don't think that they're are a lot yet. However, I have been seeing more and more people coming out with those after I've been requesting them and really hoping that they would do it. So I am seeing it starting. I don't know if we have it all yet, but I'm feeling positive that we eventually will. I hope that answered your question.
Okay, and then do you have a feel, because you said it's pretty opaque, but do you have any sense that those operations are value added, or are they test operations, or, you know?
And I can speak to the first one and potentially the second. Okay. So DAP radar, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with that. So they now have a beta for EOS DAPs, and so you can see transactions per DAP for both ETH and EOS. And you can see users in a 24-hour period. So if you go to DAP radar, then you can start to pull apart what are those transactions. Because for a time there, there was they were breaking records day over day on the EOS blockchain, but it was this block Twitter spam transaction that was just going out consistently. Now there's a feature within the blockchain design so that it can meter that back or kind of reduce that kind of digital trolling. But ultimately they just muted it entirely, is my understanding, which I don't know the functionality, because that brings up calls of centralization and lack of immutability and all that. But DAP radar would be one.
Yeah, I'm seeing DAP radar right now, and it looks like it's Ethereum only right now. Do they have other DAPs on here too?
They do. On the left side, there should be something that says EOS DAPs.
Yep, beta.
Beta, yep.
Oh.
I also saw one other that's provided by a block producer. So there's the Crypto Lions has a really good mainnet monitor, and you can see all the transactions going through. The majority of them right now are EOS bet dice. So gambling, decentralized
This is a cool app.
gambling. EOS dice or EOS bet. DAP radar. Oh, Crypto Lions mainnet monitor. You can actually see all the transactions and who's sending them and what the contents are. And then there's another one that actually goes into greater depth on the transactions. I just can't recall it.
Oh yeah, man. This is great. I'm glad that you guys taught me about this tonight. Do you guys know who built this? Do you know them?
I don't know.
Well, maybe we should Zerg them at some point in time and give you guys tokens for helping me do it. See, that's the cool thing is we can kind of leverage our tokens and go and appreciate people and maybe see what happens. Who knows? Maybe they'll appreciate us back. Maybe they won't, but who cares?
And so, Adrian, maybe that's one to look at, DAP radar, to see the DApps that are actually running, the amount of transactions.
I love this.
Okay, so I think we've run out of time. Thank you for your patience and grace on the troll fire.
I hope images were good. I hope that the videos that I had that guy secretly come in and those
Wedgie coin is going to supplant Dogecoin. I just feel it. It's my prediction for 2018. Yeah.
Oh, that was beautiful.
So thank you, Fuzzy.
Well,
Yes.
Huh?
I was just going to say thank you.
Well, thank you guys. And I look forward to talking to you guys again. And of course, if you have any interest in joining for our Hangouts, I have them every week on Saturdays. This week is going to be Bitcoin, our BitShares. Next week will be EOS Talk. And I'm always looking for people to join up and discuss things, just anything that you think is important.
Yeah, he has a podcast.
Open agenda. We hold it intentionally with an open agenda because I can talk about any of this stuff indefinitely. And
I have a topic for your Saturday one on BitShares. Is BitShares a security? And I'm happy to debate that one with you.
Is BitShares a security?
Yeah, security token, because it comes with a built-in exchange. I'd love to pull like 5 lawyers in and have that debate. It'll be bloody and super educational.
No, the thing is, this is the problem that I run into. They always have little loopholes. And my brother is a CPA who's been looking at a lot of this stuff with me because I've been trying to, like, he's wanting to form a lobbying organization because he's finding so many things that traditionally, if you label them under the traditional things that, you know, asset classes and rules, if in short, if you force the square peg into the round hole, right, you'll see that it'll fit. But the problem is, I don't think that all the regulations even really have any clue with what.
Oh no, they don't. They have none. They're trying to shove the square into the round hole.
Yeah, and what scares me, this is what scares the shit out of me, to be honest with you. Like, I will say shit at the end of this because I'm so scared about it, is that the regulators will be so ignorant, and I'm hoping not, that they will think that it's worth fighting it at a time when the rest of the world is going to be embracing it. And that's what scares me.
If you get that lobbying group going, you can count me in for sure. I will say that. Jared Polis is running for governor out here, and he posted about promoting cryptocurrency and making Colorado a crypto hub a couple of days ago on his official Facebook feed. And I started kind of like, I posted about it. So the Colorado government people are definitely taking a hard look at blockchain, that's for sure.
Well, they have to. You know, if we don't do it and if we don't advocate for it and we don't take those unpopular positions, we're risking something.
But all the banks have the lobby money, and they're taking all Congress out to lunch, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Et cetera.
Right?
That lobbying money. You gotta love that lobbying money. You know, unfortunate thing is that the loser will lose. I hope that we are not the losers on that.
I'll put it this way, Colorado doesn't seem to really care much about what the federal government has to say about a couple of things, so, we're going to sort it. Actually, we have it coming to referendum to get rid of fracking and natural gas drilling in the state on March 2. They're going to get rid of like 85% of that if Colorado citizens vote it down in a referendum, basically. So.
Well, I'm of the belief that we have disruptive technologies we don't even get to touch yet. And I think that when we can seed fund DACs that can support them, that's going to be the end for the people who want to hold malevolent levels of control. But with that said, guys, I do appreciate you, and I will talk all night, so thank you for staying.
Thanks, Buzzy. Have a good night.
Thank you, Brandon. And thank you, guys. Have a good evening. I'm going to go say hi to my wife. And hey, good luck on that DAP, by the way.
I think he's talking to you, Adrian.
Mine is
You
lovely.
put those lovebirds together. Maybe give him the opportunity to.
Right here.
Never mind.
Lolly.io, LOLY.io. Take a look, tell me what you think. I'd love to hear what you think.
Oh, have a good one, guys. Thank you. Bye.
That was interesting.
That was exciting.
Wedgie coin.
Wedgie coin. Look for that meetup.